Welcome to this week's edition of Two Men in the Middle, where two men in the middle of the heartland pontificate about politics, current events, foreign policy, and more. I'm Brandon Kinnig.
I'm Craig Huey.
Craig, we start this week just off of the last January 6th committee hearing, which was Thursday night, primetime television. And this one was interesting because the focus this time was on what Trump didn't do, or in some cases what he did do during those 182 minutes when the attack on the Capitol were occurring. So there was a massive emphasis on, first of all, proving the case that he knew what had happened and what was going on, that there were television sets on in the White House to Fox News detailing the assault on the Capitol. So there's no way he didn't know about it. And then what he didn't do, which was no calls to law enforcement, to the Pentagon, no calls checking on the safety of his vice president, as well as what he did do. He placed 2 calls to Rudy Giuliani. And we do know that Rudy Giuliani then placed calls to specific lawmakers, friendly MAGA lawmakers in the Senate, which we have those voicemails. You can listen to them, where as the riot was happening, he was still imploring them to do what they could to overturn the election. So that was the focus during those 182 minutes, was on overturning the election. As the assault was occurring, lawmakers were fleeing for their lives, putting on gas masks, and as Mike Pence actually had to be evacuated twice during that time period.
I guess watching that, didn't you think this is what the Democrats should have done for impeachment? I get it. It was like a 2-week turnaround or a 9-day turnaround or something from the 6th to the impeachment. It was very quick. And within those 2 weeks, if you remember, the night of the 6th, everybody comes out very strong. Lindsey Graham, I'm done with Trump. I tried to help. Mitch McConnell basically gives permission for everybody to walk away from Trump. But if you remember, very quickly after that, Kevin McCarthy goes to Mar-a-Lago and kind of does the rehabilitation tour of Trump begins.
Yeah, pretty much immediately.
Watching that, the only thing that I was thinking of is how could they have taken this and made this the only focus of the second impeachment?
I agree, because this has been so masterful. Now, again, there's production value. They brought in the former, I think, retired president of ABC News. But it's good because you need to be able to tell that story, that narrative. And I think that if you look at American audience today, it's very different than in past decades. There is this competition for media sources. Yeah. There is less attention span. There's social media. And so you have to really be able to tell that story. And that's where the Democrats failed and struggled to do in the first impeachment as well as the second. And they've been able to do that very well here with visualizations, with just the way that this has been organized. So that has been extremely impressive. And I've heard some critics even say that it rivals like the Army McCarthy hearings of the 1950s, which were riveting television.
The production value of this, the way it's been put on, the presentation has all been first class. I'll give the committee that. When I was watching the other day, I just kept thinking of, if we could have done half of this presentation in that time, if we could have found a witness or two, and I get it, the ground was shifting. Was Trump in? Was Trump out? What was the support level for Trump going forward? A lot of questions. Maybe we couldn't have pulled that off. But if we could have had just that 2-hour presentation and saying this is our impeachment, and the impeachment was about his inaction, and nobody can ever come near the president that's not willing to use the power of the presidency to protect the Capitol, the Congress, and overall democracy, and just left it at that. So well, yes, it's adding a lot of color and a lot of layers and a lot of understanding to exactly what happened, the timeline it happened, and how culpable Trump was in the riot that happened on the 6th. It's done a very good job at that. What it hasn't done is produced any bombshell evidence in anything that directs Trump directly to the insurrection. So if you went into this thinking, this is finally where we're going to ultimately hold Donald Trump accountable, and the evidence is coming that's going to show everybody that he directly tried to create, steer, and control that mob at the Capitol that day, that's not happening. There's indirect evidence of it. It's inferred as a sentient human being with a functioning brain. You can draw your own conclusions.
Right.
But evidence that would lead to a charge or a conviction in court is almost impossible to generate at this point in time.
Yes, and I feel like I always want to caveat when it comes to this that this is a political, not a criminal hearing, and so the job before the committee is to lay out the facts and fill in the missing gaps in what we know, which they've been able to do to a really good degree, and then it's really up to the Justice Department whether or not they have more evidence than we're able to see, and if they do, then they're able to take the evidence that they do have, and along with these gaps in information that have been filled, and be able to make that case. So that's what we don't know. We don't know what the Justice Department has, whether they actually have evidence or not directly. So all we can see is what the committee is able to obtain and present to us legally that's not binding.
And a subpoena from the DOJ is a lot different than a subpoena from Congress.
Yeah.
I mean, everything gets more serious if the DOJ actually picks this up as an investigation.
Because it also means that they have more than what we know. But yeah, I think the case to be made here is to be able to let the American people know, because I think it's very easy. You look back on the events of that day, and you have what Trump said publicly or tweeted, what others have said, but we never had a good hour by hour, even minute by minute accounting of what happened. And for the first time, we got that as close as possible to that with the 182 minutes lapse with Sarah Matthews, who is the deputy press secretary, testifying what she heard, what was said to her, the outtakes with the president's statement. So we all knew that day that the president didn't want to give a statement that was recorded. I think if you watched him give the statement he gave, which
it was a hostage video.
He felt like he didn't want to be there. It was very clear. And the statement itself was very problematic because it didn't go far enough anyway. But now you watch the outtakes and you see how so long, dozens of times they struggled to get him to say more than he wanted to say, and he kept removing parts because he didn't want to admit that he lost the election. He thought that it was too strong. He sympathized with the insurrectionists, so he didn't want to condemn them in strong terms. That was obvious.
It's completely clear that Trump wanted the 6th to happen. Once it started, regardless if that was his intent or not to start a riot, once it started, he wanted it to continue. There's just no way you can look at it, I don't think, any other way. Unfortunately, to charge him with a crime, that's not going to be enough. So I think going into the January 6th committee, if that was your expectation, you were disappointed. If the expectation was they were going to make Trump more politically toxic, especially to the group of white males that he lost, which led him to lose the election. Let's remember, Trump gained in African Americans, he gained in women, he gained in Hispanics. Why he is not the president today is because 5% of white men did not vote for him. Right. And this whole presentation is geared to that 5%.
And I will say there is evidence on the margins that show that it is having an impact.
I think
There's been this number creeping up of people who have said that he was culpable. That has creeped up than from where it was a couple months ago. There's also the number, which is the one to watch, that has also risen very steadily of people who say he's unqualified to run again, and particularly among Republican voters, primary voters. So there's been, and it's still in the single digits, but he's been peeling off support among those voters, which again is impactful. Yeah. So there is signs of that. And so I think that you have the potential for people who maybe were on the margins, thought what he did was wrong, or were semi-indifferent, who are kind of seeing all this happen and saying, well, he's too toxic. We can't run him again because there's just too much baggage there.
I think this will prevent that 5% of white men who may have been Trump triers are just so agitated that at 2016 they just couldn't vote for Hillary. Let's give this a shot. That's going to keep these committee hearings will keep that 5% from coming back to Trump. Also, it'll probably add some more percentage points to it.
And we know that
that's what they were trying to do.
That's what they were trying to do. And we know it's been somewhat successful because Trump has been very angry during this 100%. Whole time. I mean, he's lashed out at McCarthy because, again, I think that was a mistake on McCarthy's part to completely pull out because they have no skin in the game now. Like, it's all one-sided. And Trump doesn't have the ability to do any type of rebuttal.
But what's saving Trump right now?
In terms of his support, or?
Yes. I think you just said it. You just made me think of it. What ultimately is saving Donald Trump right now? He's off Twitter.
Yeah,
he's off Twitter.
That's a good point. Okay,
this is the case against censorship.
He doesn't have that reach.
He would be reliving, looking like a maniac to the entire country, responding to what's happening on the 6th. So What's saving Trump? The committee has actually been less impactful because Trump cannot directly respond to it on Twitter to a mass audience. It just reinforces what a lunatic he actually is. So censorship giveth, censorship taketh away.
Yeah, that's true. But I do think on par, I mean, it's definitely hurting him. And I think that's also impacting why he wants to declare his candidacy from what reports have said much earlier. And in some cases, perhaps before the midterm elections, which has Republicans nervous. Because if he does that, I mean, that can have an impact on the outcome of those elections. So again, I feel like we're in this scenario where this should be a banner year for the Republicans. They should make extremely wide gains. But if you combine like the poor recruitment on the Senate side with Trump getting involved before the midterms, there's the potential that they could limit their gains significantly because of that. And so we're looking at 2014 all over again, but with Trump in the mix this time. Not unlike 2018, right? I mean, again, it's there. So that's the issue, and Trump cannot be controlled. And at the end of the day, it's all about Trump and what he wants to do. And I don't know why Republicans can't realize this. Like, he really doesn't care. I mean, he cares about his candidates winning as far as his win-loss ratio.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, he really doesn't care about control of the House or the Senate. He cares about his personal prospects as president.
Well, and the January 6th committee, I think, is also impacting J.D. Vance, Dr. Oz, and Herschel Walker, because those are his three handpicked, hand-selected Senate candidates. And to your point, people are saying, okay, not only are we talking about putting Trump back in 2024, we're going to put three acolytes in with him. I mean, we're going to put three people that owe everything to him and seem to have no interest really in participating in the Senate at all. Yeah. I think as the January 6th committee, as it's filled in the colors of this picture and it's made what's happened more clear and more vivid, there has to be a downstream effect, I would think, on the candidates that Trump has endorsed. And the gentleman from Pennsylvania running for governor that for some reason I cannot ever remember his name, Mastriano. This has to be killing him too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and he's the most extreme out of all of them. Yeah.
Because he just basically said, if Trump don't win the 2024 election and I'm governor, I just ain't signing the thing. I'm just going to blow the whole thing
And
up.
he gets to appoint the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania, unlike in other states. So he has direct control. So
do you think 5% of, we'll say 5% of moderate Republican white suburban dudes, I think they would be very uncomfortable with Trump and those four people in office. And I think they see him as a package.
I completely agree. And I think, I don't know the best way to summarize and to easily tell the story, but there's plenty of articles out. Axios had one of the most comprehensive pieces on this. The insider plan by Trump Inc. And his closest MAGA advisors to remake the federal bureaucracy for his 2024 term, assuming he wins office. And this was in the news cycle back in the last remaining months of his presidency, the waning months. So I would say this was sometime, I think it was like December, January, before he was completely out of office. He signed an executive order that quickly was repealed by Biden regarding it was called Schedule F.
Yeah.
So the whole idea was it would give Trump the authority to completely overhaul career civil servants and get rid of them. So these are civil servants who remain in the agencies throughout multiple presidential administrations, non-political, non-partisan, and he wants loyalists, and he wants the ability to completely remove and replace them with people that are completely loyal to him.
He's learning.
Yeah.
He knows what stymied him the last time. He doesn't have a learning curve anymore.
So his team has this plan in place to have him immediately sign that on day one.
Absolutely.
And they're creating this short list of loyalists that they are questioning literally on a monthly basis to make sure that they are remaining 100% loyal to fill all of these prospective vacancies from the people that they are going to fire.
You put him back in at day one, he knows the grift already. It probably took him a good 2 years to learn it in his first term. Trump, in a magnitude of danger to the country, is tenfold if he gets back in.
Completely.
And
I don't think we can't overstate the significance of this norm being broken, because we have always relied on a civil servant bureaucracy, federal, that has based on expertise, based on knowledge, longevity. And if you completely wipe that away, you're going to have entire agencies and departments that are completely ineffective and literally won't be doing their job. They will just be doing the bidding of the president from a political standpoint.
Brendan, I thought that was core to conservative values: incremental change, consistency, no big cuts at it.
Limited but effective government.
Slow,
yeah, right.
Limited but effective. You guys used to believe that expertise mattered, experience matters. I guess all of that we're just pushing
that's out the window. And that's what I find most scary.
Yeah. I want to talk about Trump's real legal jeopardy in the state of Georgia. And I don't want to talk about it in the context of Trump, because to me, that's the least interesting part of the story.
Well, and I'm glad you bring this up, because I don't know why this gets overlooked, because again, there's all the sexiness of the DOJ and whether or not they charge Trump. But the one that is most likely and will most likely have the most impact would be the Georgia investigation.
So I've asked people to do this on the pod before, but if your team left, you got to find at least 2 or 3 different legal people on the right for you to follow, and that who are straight shooters, who are not there just giving the narrative, that when they tell you something about what's happening on their side, you can believe them. My 3 are Andy McCarthy, David French, and Sarah Isgur. Those are the 3 folks that if I need to know something and I don't want to get caught in liberal spin, those 3 generally will lay it out pretty clearly for you what's happening. So Trump's legal jeopardy in Georgia stems from the phone call where he told, was it Rattensberger, the AG at that point in time, listen, just find like 12,000 votes. I don't care where you do it.
Yeah.
I just need you to find the votes.
Rattensberger
I'll
was
take
the
care of the
Secretary of
rest.
State. Yeah.
Was it the governor or was it?
Secretary of State. So, yeah. And so he called Rattensberger up, said to find these votes. And he was very clear, because I think at one point he even mentioned the exact number that he was behind, the 13,000 number. He's like, so I don't care where it comes from, just fine. And then there was also the implicit threat behind that, saying that something to the effect there will be consequences.
Well, and his intent was clear too. You just give me the votes, or just say you've got the votes. I'll take care of the rest.
Pretty clear, make it up. Like you go whatever means necessary. So it wasn't even about finding legal votes. It was just find votes.
So I heard David French read the Georgia statute. I'm not going to try to remember it, but it's very broad and it covers a whole lot of stuff. Like even asking, hey, Brandon, can you just help me out here? Could you just help me by? That is clearly illegal. Mm-hmm. Just the ask. We're not even getting into, did he imply there would be consequences if he didn't? So I think it's clear that by the letter of the law, Trump absolutely violated that statute. The interesting part is, should the state of Georgia move forward with a prosecution of an ex-president for an act that he did while he was a sitting president? And you and I kind of warmed up on this topic, and I think we were taking the role reversal.
I think we're on opposing sides.
Yeah, we're on opposing sides of this. And I'm taking the more traditional conservative side of no way, absolutely should not. And I started my argument to you, Brandon, with the evidence, and my analogy was Ken Paxton, the attorney general in Texas, who's been he's been indicted with a crime, but he hasn't been charged for like over 3 years. We don't know how that happened. That's just a goofy Texas thing, I guess. Do you think the attorney general of Texas, which, by the way, I believe the Republican, who is a Republican in the Republican Party in Texas, has voted to say the 2020 election is not legitimate. I believe that also multiple times under Allen West's leadership, they voted to secede from the union. Do you not think Ken Paxton is going to charge Biden with something, some violation of Texas law?
I mean, it's possible, but and this is where you and I differ, because I think that what Trump did was such an existential threat to democracy and to our norms in terms of having fair and free elections that he should be charged. And I also think that, and you can call it a norm if you want, but this idea that we don't charge, presidents and especially former presidents with crimes that they've committed does us a disservice as a country, since we have this precept that everybody is equal under the law. Well, apparently everybody's not equal under the law, because if you're a former president, that doesn't apply, because we have this, unstated norm that, we're not going to charge you because of potential, disruptions to national unity and so forth. But should it be the case?
I think that's the one thing that Trump proved to everybody. No, the laws do not apply to the president of the United States. We all kind of strongly suspected it. Trump just laid it out there to bear.
And see, I would say we're already entering into a new era. So considerations of what Republicans may or may not do, I don't think should be given significant weight in this case because they're going to take those actions anyway. Before all of this happened, Republicans have already announced that if they gain back the House, they are going to impeach Biden.
This is part of my point.
Yes. And so that's going to happen. But I think we also have to differentiate between impeachment, which is a political action, and courts of law, which are based on the rule of law and actual laws being broken or not broken, not just presidential ethics. And so Republicans, yes, they could say we're going to charge, but again, there would need to be weight behind those charges. There would need to actually be evidence that this president or that president broke those laws as they applied. And federal is one thing, but that becomes more difficult to prove in state courts. I mean, with existing presidents, especially, and let alone former presidents.
I think that our core disagreement is that you still believe that the facts, the truth, what actually happened, and the law apply. And I've become so cynical that if there's power to be gained by it, it will be done. It does not matter. My evidence of this is I just watched the leader of the Republican Party, the President of the United States, and the gentleman who is hands down favored to be your next Republican nominee for the presidency, run through, 65 cases about the election that none of those rules of evidence applied. He had no evidence. There was no truth behind any of that. They knew it. I just watched the leader of the Republican Party and the President of the United States march into court over 60 times or send his lawyers to the court over 60 times and tell an absolute whopper of a lie.
And he lost all those cases, though.
He did, but he still went forward. He still did it. He still got the publicity. He still got the messaging. You don't think that just by that alone is worth it to Ken Paxton?
Because, I mean, that's...
To Ken Paxton. Not to
Ken
you.
Ken Paxton is already doing
Ken
that,
Paxton.
though, with the Biden administration. I mean,
that's what
Texas
I'm saying.
Has launched
He's
more
already doing it.
against...
He's already. You don't think he'll follow the logical conclusion and just charge Biden with a crime?
Well, I mean, he may, but again, that's not going to be upheld without significant evidence. I think, he could charge. So, say, tomorrow he charges Biden with
I'm not saying convicted. I'm saying charged. I'm not saying convicted.
I think it's a slippery slope, though, when we withhold charges because we're afraid of what opponents or what others may do in the future. I mean, because that becomes an obstacle to justice. It's justice not rendered at that point, and taken to its logical conclusion, then there is no basis to then ever charge a former president because we're at this precipice now of what the other side may do, and we're in this tit for tat. And there's no good end to that then, because then, you can have all manner of not only norms broken, but laws broken, and there won't be any consequence because we're afraid to actually go there with charges.
In 2016, one of the primary chants by the Republicans at the convention was lock her up. Over and over and over again. The Republicans wanted a legal law enforcement remedy for something that they thought was not fair. You don't see any logical extension of that to charging an ex-president.
I guess I do, but I feel like they're going down that road anyway. So what we do from this point, is it going to exacerbate it? It's not going to, we're already there. And so if there is strong evidence against Trump and prosecutors in Georgia don't come forward and they just say we're not going to prosecute, I don't think it changes anything in the Republican playbook in terms of what they will do in the future.
So you're saying we're so far down the hole.
It's too late. That's what I'm saying.
It's too late. They're going to do it anyway. Just go by the rule of the law.
Completely agree. Yep.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. I
am down with charging Trump. As much shit as he's pulled, I am totally down with charging him for any crime that meets that he meets the criteria of having committed. I'm just saying, wow, we better get ready because there's going to be a lot of repercussions.
And it speaks volumes, the fact that he is so adamant about trying to declare his candidacy before the end of the year because he wants to use that as a shield against prosecutors 100%. Who would be, not want to charge a sitting political candidate. He knows all this.
But Brandon, this is baked into our system all over the place. The fact that journalists didn't want to run the Hunter Biden story because they said it was too close to a thing.
Yeah,
the DOJ has an actual policy that says if we're in an election year, pull back.
Yeah.
We don't want to. So political bias and political maneuvering is all over.
But also, see, and we were talking about this offline, that didn't prevent the DOJ from holding back in 2016, though, against Hillary Clinton. She was a sitting candidate.
Yep.
They publicly announced they were opening an investigation. Then they closed it. Then they opened it days before the election again.
Yep.
So you had...
And if you don't think that made an impact...
Oh, it completely did, yeah.
How-
But that's what I'm saying. I'm like, we're already so far down that road. Like, I
So you're saying that if we just we can't go guns down, we can't get together and say this was all stupid. It's just all dumb. We can't.
No, because
we
I
just
think
can't keep going.
You
like
were
this.
operating under the assumption that there's going to be some type of truce, or in this political war,
Yeah.
and that the other side is going to play by whatever rules that are set forth, and that's not going to happen. I think that there is this mentality now, whatever it takes politically, we are going to do everything, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the norms, to see what sticks. Like, this isn't like, the 1980s or 1990s where, both sides played by these established norms, understood the rules of the game, were unwilling to cross certain lines. Like, those lines have already been crossed. More lines are going to be crossed. There's nothing to stop that at this point.
So we're in a conflict that negotiated settlement is not an option, is what you just said.
Yes, exactly. That's how
Okay.
I feel. There's no coming back from it at this point.
Then
It's
if-
a point of no return.
If there is no negotiated option, then it's to the last man. Then everything that can be done will be done, and that's where it feels like we're. That's what it feels like we're heading. To me, that would make me so disappointed if Trump's done all of this damage to the presidency, and then his lasting legacy was he gets charged with something, it doesn't stick, he never goes to trial, he never spins it, because that's never going to happen, and it leads to a series of more political charges, criminal charges for people when they leave office. That would just be the punctuation mark on his absolute crapping of all over the presidency of the United States.
And I do want to...
And we deserve it because
we
put
deserve
him
it.
there.
And I want to step back for a second. I don't want to be all doom and gloom, and that's why I am so adamant that Trump is an existential threat to democracy. I'm under no illusions that what he started, this banner of populist authoritarianism, will continue on. It will, but it's going to be less organized and less unified without him at the helm. So if he is extinguished from political life and no longer has a role in our political debate as a candidate, as a mover and shaker, I think that the movement behind him becomes much more disorganized and starts to just unravel, and it's not going to have the strength that it has now. And then that is the potential for us to slowly try to regain some norms that have been lost.
I was playing this next question out my mind, and it made me realize I sound like a 16-year-old girl here, Brandon. But how are we going to quit this guy? My side can't quit him because he just provides too much fuel and too much narrative. We will not let him drop, because if we're talking about him, we're talking about something more disgusting than our own performance in government. And you can't let him go because you don't know what else is out there or what's next. How is this going to get flushed out? Don't we have to reach some sort of negotiated settlement to say, okay, here's how we're going to do this. You don't run him, we won't charge him.
You can only reach some type of negotiated settlement at the point where there is a realization and an acknowledgement and understanding that he can no longer help certain politicians politically. Because until that happens, you're going to have politicians like Josh Hawley, like others. You're going to have this substantial segment of the party that will remain in his good graces and loyalty because it politically it is advantageous to them. So until you make him toxic, to the vast majority of office holders in the party, where it's not going to impact their reelections, then you're not going to be able to have a negotiated settlement, because at the end of the day, it's always going to be about retaining political power. And if you have office holders that see any type of negotiated settlement as a threat to their ability to retain power, which Trump will seize upon and say, you're a rhino, you sold out. I mean, he's done that to Mitch McConnell, on small, insignificant things. But I completely believe that a fragmented MAGA opposition is much more preferable long-term to getting back slowly where we need to be than a unified opposition led by Trump himself.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that, my ideas of, hey, can't we all get back? Can't we all find a space that we all occupied 20 years ago? We're probably past that. There's probably no path back to where we were. But that doesn't mean we can't forge something moving forward. And I think what the problem is, we're going to forge on two different ways. I don't think we're going to do it together. The Democrats are running in a polar opposite direction of the Republicans. There is no coming together. And at some point, somebody's just going to have to choose which way we go.
Yeah,
and I don't know what that looks like.
I mean, the choices that we made. And I always go back. I mean, part of this, and it may be a little bit too simplistic to say you have to get Trump out of the way. Part of what led to Trump, I mean, Trump didn't happen in a vacuum. We've talked before about the rise of Sarah Palin. You can go back to Newt Gingrich. Yeah. There's been these like steps along this path. But it all goes back to like our primary system sucks. The way we elect, choose people in the primaries, it is conducive to this type of outcome and to these type of extreme candidates that can just kind of run roughshod over the will of the American people. We need electoral reform. And so that is a major obstacle. And that's not something you're going to have done at the federal level at any point. So that has to be a state-by-state and a local effort to get there. And so you're going to have different organizations come together to handle that aspect. But I feel like a lot of it has been predicated. We've had this system a long time in terms of the way we've elected people. We've seen how people can take advantage of that and circumvent the will of the voters in that way. What also concerns me long-term is the continuing gap that's going to exist, that's growing between the Electoral College and the popular vote over time. We didn't have gaps like that 20, 30 years ago. Those gaps are becoming more and more pronounced. I was reading analysis on 538 about how even if Democrats win by like 1 or 2 points in the popular vote, that's not enough to win the Electoral College. They can still lose the Electoral College handily. So really, Biden's, I think it was, what did he have, a 4-point-something percentage in the popular vote? Like that was enough to eke out a Electoral College win. But anything less than that, almost half of that is not enough to win the Electoral College. That's a problem. I mean, we've only had one Republican in the past 30 years that has won the national popular vote.
That's a problem. As somebody who's never voted for a Republican in my life, that's a problem. It's a problem.
It's a problem we have to solve for.
It's a problem with the party. It's a problem with the system. That represents that should be one of the road flares going off for people. That one of the major parties in the United States has not won the popular vote for president in, what'd you say, 30 years?
Yeah, 2004.
But has held the office of the presidency multiple times.
Yep.
I will give Biden some credit this week when he did not use the emergency powers to declare climate change an emergency. This is an example of Trump broke that norm when he declared the border an emergency. And even people like Mark Meadows were saying, this is not good. This is not what you want to do. This sets a precedent down that's going to be used in ways that you don't want it to be used to.
Right.
I think Biden stood up to the progressive left a little bit. I don't expect that resiliency to stand.
No.
At some point, I think he caves and he declares a climate change emergency. I have no clue what that means.
How broad-based it'll be, what it'll include.
I don't know how far he's willing to go, but I do know if you want something done about climate, pass a fucking law. It is not something done by fiat by the president.
Right.
And it's just another sign of once the Senate has taken itself offline, this is what you get.
So that's a good kind of segue into how do you feel about so there's been a couple of votes this week. Democrats are putting forward on gay marriage, on contraceptive use. I don't know how you feel about that. I personally think that it's kind of smart politically to put Republicans on the record for this and say, hey, if these threats are potentially, or these rights are potentially under threat, put out your cards. Where do you stand on this? And I think it was striking. Well, first, a couple of things. On the gay marriage vote, I was actually surprised that there were 47 Republicans that voted for that. I guess I expected less. But I do think that one has potential for passage in the Senate to get 10 votes and to be able to break a filibuster. So that's interesting. And if so, that's a win that the Democrats can tout. Contraceptive vote is
a little more tricky.
That one's more tricky. That one only had 8 Republican votes. Yeah.
Brandon, shouldn't you, as a Republican senator, be introducing the bill to make birth control over the counter and non-prescription and paid for by the federal government?
It seems like it would be a smart move.
Since abortion
yeah.
is being restricted, wouldn't the next logical step say we're going to help people, women, avoid it?
And where would that have most political impact? Suburban women voters.
College-educated women who you want to be with.
The Republicans
but instead, you can't get all of your party to get on.
No.
I think those votes are straight political votes. I think they have to be done. I think it's a good idea. What you're doing is you're making campaign commercials at this point in time. And I hope what the Democrats are doing are starting the theme of just think about it. Just think about what you're doing. Hey, I'm not going to – if the Democrats cut a commercial touting their own success, that's a laugh riot at that point. Even the successes that they have, nobody wants to talk or hear about at this point in time. And they're overridden by Afghanistan and other things the administration has screwed the absolute pooch on. To me, the winning formula, or the formula that keeps the Senate and minimizes the damage as best you can in the House, is – this is what these people are. Not all of these people are this, but there is a bigger portion than you would be comfortable with who will vote for shit like this.
It's fear. It's reminding voters that, hey, you may be unhappy with us, you may be frustrated, you may not like what we're doing, but this is what the other side
I don't want to be
do.
fearful. I just want you to say, just look. I'm not telling you they're bad. I'm not telling you that Marjorie Taylor Greene and that idiot from Florida Gates are going to wreck the country. They're not existential threats. They're morons. We've always had morons in government. I don't want to scare you. I just want you to say, just take an honest look at those people. Do you have anything in common with them? Is this what you want? I think there's a way there that we could weave a very effective message together if we had any leadership of the Democratic Party, which we do not.
Well, and I do think, and I know you don't like to use the word fear, but I do think the potential loss of rights or that looming on the horizon is very strong motivation. It's a little bit different. I think on the abortion issue, like anti-abortion, pro-life people, they've been motivated for years because they've been on the other side trying to change the law. It's a little difficult to stay motivated now when Roe v. Wade has been overturned. You're not as energized as you were before then on the federal level to get out and vote because it's like, well, we've already realized our goal here. Whereas the left, they've been complacent for many years, right? Because it was assumption that Roe would always be there. It's not now. So they can't be complacent. They actually have to be motivated to get out. And
don't get me wrong. I'm not above playing on fear. That would be one commercial. The next one would be the fear about abortion rights.
Yeah.
I think at this point, we've got to take a tact of everything. Everything's in play. But we do have to center around what are we talking about? What is the benefit of us being here? And if the benefit of us being here, all we can come up with is they are not here, then let's get to it. If that's what the message is going to be, let's start cultivating that. Let's start planting that throughout candidates. Let's start developing that so we can tweak it so we're the best we can be come the midterms.
Yeah.
I'm afraid we're going to lose momentum in that area through the January 6th committee. There's people out there saying, oh, just wait, we're going to drop some bomb in September and that's going to change. No, it's not. The only thing that changes it if we get off our ass and do something ground level that makes sense to the people we're trying to talk to, presents ourselves in the most positive way we can. And I know this is a pipe dream, but some sort of vision for what we want the future to be.
That, yeah.
Can we just go back to the basics of what a political campaign is and maybe we'd do better?
Well, and there is I think a silver lining. So one bright spot I did want to highlight, which is critical, is that there is this bipartisan working group that has crafted language with enough support to reform the Electoral College Count Act of 1887, which would explicitly say the vice president has a ceremonial role, that under no circumstances can he deviate from the electoral votes that have already been cast and approved by Congress. It also firms up some lingering issues with the way that those counts are conducted and the president's
Isn't that you have to have 80 people in the House and like 20 senators or something? They give a percentage, but it breaks out to
object for an objection.
Yeah, to object. You got to have like 20 senators and 80 House
and
members.
This is critical because this will prevent any, if Trump were, God forbid, to become president again and pick somebody as his VP who would, no matter what, contest, the vote, this would prevent that from happening. And there's enough votes behind it. So again, this may seem with everything going on, small and insignificant, but it really isn't. It's something that should have been done a long time ago.
How significant is that? Because Trump could have crossed that bar. He had 120 people in the House. You mean he couldn't dig up 20 senators? I think that'd be pretty easy.
For an objection?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that part is true, but I think on the VP, solidifying what the VP can do is key, because that was a legal argument that was thrown out, but has been made by Trump's lawyers in terms of what the VP can do. And we'll see what the final language looks like. But that legislation has needed updates for a long time. It's been.
How about the Senate and House can't object to the slate of electors? The governor from the state has to object, because he's the governor of the state that the election was held in.
Right.
And he's not part of the federal government.
And what if you made the governor and the secretary of state?
Maybe.
There you go. That would be, firm it up more.
I get Republicans talking about this, because I think Mitch McConnell supports this. But if you come up with a new rule to prevent something that just happened, and the rule you suggest wouldn't have prevented the thing that happened, because the objection still would have been there. Is that enough? Is my question. I get it. Pence, the role of Pence, that would have taken that out, but I don't think if this rule was in place, that wouldn't have stopped the sixth. That wouldn't have stopped Trump. I don't think.
Yeah, the objection would have still.
I mean, I can
forward.
name 10 southern states off the top of my head that their senators would have objected. I don't think that would have been that high of a bar to meet. I don't know. I guess when I heard about that, yes, step in the right forward. If that's all we can get for now, so be it. Let's do it. But that's not a stopping point. I don't think.
I agree. There's more that has to be done. I mean, that's just the beginning.
But back to Biden a little bit, and this not declaring climate change a disaster. I mean, I think under the disaster declaration, could Biden step in and start telling private industry what adjustments they have to make because of the climate emergency? Certainly sounds like he could try it.
Sounds like he could.
Could he put limits on imports and exports of certain? Absolutely. I think this is something that I give Biden credit for not doing it, but this is, again, the seal was cracked by Trump declaring the southern border an emergency when it was not. Eventually, I think Biden's going to fold after the midterms, and he's going to make this climate emergency thing real, because he knows they're going to lose the House, and once they do that, everything is gone.
Yeah.
And it just pisses me off that we still don't know what Joe Manchin is and how to use him. And it's just so ridiculous when I can't believe Joe Manchin. You can't believe the coal baron from West Virginia who takes money from coal and whose constituency are coal miners didn't vote for that.
Yeah.
Really, just put a goddamn Republican in there. Just lose the seat. Just be done with it.
So I'm confused. Like, the last I heard is there was talk about Democrats just going along with whatever Joe Manchin wanted at this point, because that was all they could get. Like, are they going to go along with that? I mean, is anything going to happen, or is that stalled now?
And this is the second part that proves how fundamentally unserious my side is. Because if you were really serious about some of these things, you would break out the most popular pieces that Manchin could support, and you'd pass them.
Yeah. Just do those as standalone.
So why are we all up Manchin's ass again? For what? Just get rid of just give the seat, kick him out of the party. What I don't understand is, why can't we say, listen, Manchin's on our team, but he's on our team for judges, he's on our team for appointments, and he has a very narrow domestic legislation that he can support for us. Yeah. But he's still on the team. It's better than have a Democrat sitting there than an R. And again, your party hates the government and doesn't want to govern. My party loves the government and wants to govern, and we have no idea what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's the choice the American people have.
I mean, they lack strategy and lack any type of coherent
With all this talk about energy prices, Brandon, what's the 10-year energy policy of the United States?
I have no idea.
I have no clue. I have no idea.
Do we have one?
Do we have a forward-looking energy policy about how we're going to make this transition off carbon fuels to our? No,
I don't think so.
Okay, so that's still just floating around the political realm, and we'll just slap each other around political with that. We really don't have any real plan or idea of how to pull ourselves along energy-wise.
It doesn't seem like we do any type of long-term strategy anymore on anything, let alone energy, which is crucial to our economy and to the planet.
Let's pivot that to our last topic. How do you feel about Joe Biden? Let me ask you a series of questions. Don't answer them if you don't want to. Was Biden the first Democrat that you voted for president?
He was, yeah.
Okay. Wow, that hurts my soul as a Democrat right there. Okay, so if this was your first Democrat, how is Biden meeting your expectations?
I mean, it's been very disappointing. Yeah, I from a very low bar of just stability and lack of chaos in the executive branch. Like, I appreciate what he's done, but outside of that, there's been just no movement on anything, and he seems to be stuck with these low approval ratings, is not able to speak well to what his administration can or should be doing on the economy. There seems to be a reluctance by his staff to engage on that. They just seem to be heads down without seeming to realize that the ramifications of not being out there communicating what you're doing or what you're trying to do to stabilize prices and help middle-class families. So, and then, of course, you have the progressives that are unhappy that he hasn't done enough or gone far enough, which would be detrimental to him politically as well. But, it's frustrating. And I don't feel like anything's going to change in terms of where he is. He just seems mired there for the rest of his term, which makes it unfathomable to me that he would run for another term.
Well, to me, that's the best thing that could happen. Just lose the House and just sit there for 2 years.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to do anyway.
Well, and then at least he can, put up the excuse that Republicans have the legislative branch. I can't do anything. I'm stuck.
Picture Biden without the Senate. And I think Biden secretly didn't want the Senate. He wanted at least one of those Senate seats to stay in Georgia to stay. Biden without control of the Senate, it's a completely different presidency.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Because all of the Build Back Better and all of this stuff just goes away.
There isn't the pressure there either from the base.
Maybe there would have been an opportunity for Afghanistan to go a little bit different too. Brandon, would you consider voting for a Democrat again?
I would. It depends on who the nominee is and who the Republican nominee is, I guess, yeah. We're in... but it can't be. Biden and Trump are both so deeply unpopular. So it's crazy to me that we could have a redo of 2020.
God, just shoot me.
And think about this. Biden will be 81 during that campaign. Trump will be 79.
Biden cannot campaign. I go back to, again, Jimmy Fallon. They had to cut the camera off of him. He was babbling so much. He told a story last week that he had cancer, which nobody can validate.
Did he even clarify that it was when he was a child?
They talked about he's had some skin cancer, like tags or moles removed. Maybe that was it. But he was talking about where he grew up or something. You could wipe oil off oil residue off wind. Again, he goes off on these homespun tangents, telling you a story about his boyhood that are completely false, made up, and just the ramblings of an old dude. And my biggest complaint about Trump was that the president's most powerful tool are his words. Trump chose to diminish his and give his away for entertainment value and political expediency.
Yeah.
Biden just doesn't have any.
Yeah.
That's the difference. He just doesn't. What would Biden speak about that you would be interested in listening to? Nothing. Would you attend a Biden rally or a Biden speech?
Oh, no.
No.
Yeah.
No. So one president just was a 12-year-old, and now we have one who just doesn't have the mental or physical energy.
Well, and what's interesting is, they both ramble on differently, but they both ramble. That's why I would not go to a speech for either of them. Trump gives these 2 and 3 hour speeches where he rambles on.
Did you see Trump's quote that life begins at 80?
No.
Somebody was making fun of Biden for being old, and it suddenly clicked in his head that, hey, I'm going to be Biden's age when I run for president. So he's out there letting people know that he might be old, but he's not old. He's not Joe Biden old. He's old, but he's not that.
Maybe I'll have another one of those moments, during the debate where he reminds us that he's a senior too.
God, that was the greatest line of all time. Is there anything Biden can do to help revive his presidency? Or is it just, hey, take your lumps at the midterm and just pack it in?
I mean, I think the economy. I mean, I think gas prices coming down, inflation stabilizing. I think nobody's under any illusions that inflation is going to completely just drop rapidly. But if it can stabilize and you can have a continued reduction in gas prices, that could help him. But I feel like anything else, like I don't see, any other issues helping get him out of the 40s in terms of approval where he's stuck.
Gas prices came down this week. I think gas is down like $1 in Missouri from its high. Yeah,
and it's in Kansas here. It's like the 380s. It was $4.39 several weeks ago.
Oil last week briefly fell to under $100 a barrel. So oil is about $100 a barrel.
Right.
Looking at some calculators I found from the Googler machine, if oil is $100 a barrel, the price of gas on average should be around $3.26 nationally.
Yeah.
And for us in Missouri, we usually run about 30 cents-ish or more, about 30, 35 cents below the national average.
Right.
Just as our taxes are pretty lean. That would mean with the price of oil, our gas should be about $2.90, $2.95 a gallon. It's not. And the reason it's not, it's what we talked about last week, is refinery capacity. I say this because I do not believe the opportunity to drive gas down to 220, 210, those cheapy ranges that everybody feels good about.
Right.
That's not going to happen. There's going to be a limit to how much they can drive the price down just based on the price of crude alone. So $3.30 gas, that might just be the new 220. That just might be the mark that everybody just has to live with until are we going to build more refineries? Are we just done? What are we doing?
Right. So, or until we move into the next phase of
gas isn't going to, it's going to come down, but it's not going to be where people are feeling really, really good about it. Brandon, what does the country need right now? Don't you feel like we need something? I think we both have talked several times that we think we're out of focus a little bit. We're not operating at our highest level. I think everybody knows that and would agree with that. What gets us back? What knocks us that little quarter turn of the lens back into focus, that things become a little sharper and clearer and we get back to just feeling and operating a little bit more about how we're used to operating in America?
Well, I think part of it is that it's not just the right direction, wrong direction track, which wrong direction is high. I mean, there's this inherent pessimism, this loss of trust in all institutions, Americans feeling like, the United States isn't, a great force in the world. People are feeling very down on their country more so than they ever have in the past. And I think that's a number of things, political and social issues, a rise in mass shootings, the just intransigence on the part of political leaders and dysfunction in Congress. But in terms of I think it all goes back. You really need someone who can lead and speak to that and who's trustworthy and credible. And we don't have those people. We don't have them right now in positions of authority in government. So the question is there somebody outside of government who can be that voice and say, hey, here are the problems. Yeah. Here's what we should be doing. There is a lot of common cause to unite Americans. You have this broad swath of the middle that are in agreement on many of these issues, but they feel not heard, and they feel like they're completely disconnected because of how extreme both parties are. So I mean, I don't know. I've thought about this so many times, and I don't know that there's any magic elixir.
Well, let me ask this follow-up question. Is localism dead? Because all the way through the history of the United States, if we would have identified we had a problem like this, the answer would have always been it has to originate at the local level.
Yeah.
If you're not happy with your politics, well, just lower your eye level. If you're not happy with the federal government, are you happy in your state? Are you happy in your county? Are you happy in your town? Most people, as you come down that realm, that ladder, they find a level that they feel comfortable with, and they say they're fairly competent.
Well,
are we just done with that? And now there has to be some overarching thing, or we're just not going to be happy?
Well, I see, and I think that's where there used to always be a difference, because people that would be frustrated or upset with federal politics would be happy within their community's local level government. That was always detached from federal. But now we've had this basically from the top down, this trickle down, for lack of a better term, of the toxicity and vitriol in federal politics all the way down to local level.
Yeah.
I mean, so that in many cases, local politics resembles national and federal. And this started before 2020, but it really came to a head 2020 during the mask mandate debates and the emergence of COVID with local school boards and local county commissions and city councils. So anymore, I think that those elections and those organizations are just consumed by the same issues that divide people at the federal level.
They seem to be federal level issues seem to be permeating now
into local,
everything. And everybody has their eyes up, I think, looking for the solution.
At the federal level, yeah. Which I still think, like, if there is going to be a solution, it's going to come still at the local level because it's going to happen much more quickly than it would ever happen at the federal level. And it would be a model. We've always been about, laboratory of democracy, right? We see models at the local state level that work, and then those get adopted nationwide or gain popularity. So that's why it's going to be at the local level at some point. But again, I think it has to be a person who emerges who you can point to that success and then emulate that.
It feels like the model isn't broke. We're just not using the model the way it was intended.
Yeah.
We took a tool out of the toolbox and we're trying to drive in a nail with a screwdriver. And when we don't get what we want, we complain bitterly without realizing that the outcome was designed. That's how this is supposed to work.
Well, and partially, and this has also trickled down local level from federal, we've seen incentivized the willingness to do nothing, to accomplish nothing.
Yes.
Build up your brand instead and fundraise based off of dysfunction and the inability to solve for major problems like immigration, like budgeting, all of these issues that we fight over now year after year, cycle after cycle. And that has trickled down to the local level as well because politicians are saying, hey, that works. That will keep me in office. It's not effective for me to solve problems because I don't raise money as easily off of that as I do on not solving problems.
And I don't know anybody on my side that's happy with the fact that now 50 individual states get to decide the abortion issue.
Yeah.
And nobody that I hang out with, could be wrong, has shown any excitement or enthusiasm for now you just have to change the mind of your state. I live in Missouri, one of the 2 or 3 states that had the trigger law that immediately put back an abortion. We have a long fight to go. But if we're willing to, we can fight that fight now on ground that we can win. Because we don't have to have a national referendum. We just have to change so many minds in Missouri. Is that going to be hard? Absolutely.
I think part of the daunting aspect of that is you also have to look at the role gerrymandering has played, especially in state house and state senate districts, and that goes back to why electoral reform is more vital than ever on the local level to be able to offset some of that and have a more equal playing field.
And this is what I always ask people. Tell me when somebody starts complaining bitterly about Missouri and we need a national law and all this stuff. I just ask them, what do you want? Are you saying that it's not worth it to have political policy defined in the state and that you would be unhappy with a judgment in the state of Missouri, let's say, that made abortion legal, but it was still illegal in Missouri? In Texas. So are you saying that the fight to make abortion legal in just Missouri isn't worth it? Because you seem to be very engaged the fight at the national level. But once it came down to Missouri, what is it? Are you discouraged by the fact that now you're starting 2 laps behind and it's going to take 10, 15, 20 years possibly to change? Is that, or are you mad about, or is it you just want it to happen? I keep asking people, this is happening the way it's supposed to happen. So are you saying you don't like the model anymore and you want a new one? What actually is not working in your mind? And people can never really answer that. Because again, things that are not solvable at the federal level get kicked back to the states.
Yeah.
That's how it's supposed to be. Are you saying that's not what you want? If you're saying that's not what you want, are you saying you don't want a federal system? Where are we going with this? And that's where I get lost with people all the time. I just want abortion to be legal. Okay, I get that. Your opportunity now is in the state that you live in.
Yep.
You should direct your energies, monies, efforts.
Well, and hopefully
into
this
that.
is a wake-up call now, because I think the left for the longest time has focused only on federal, not on local, particularly like on the power that state attorney generals wield, state secretary of states. And so the Republicans have really built up this massive advantage state by state within state elected officials and then within state houses. I mean, Democrats have not had a majority of the state houses of the country in a long time. I mean, going back to probably 2010 elections. So again, there's grassroots work that needs to be done there to be able to reverse some of these policy changes that have come down from the Supreme Court. That work should have started years ago, but to your point, so much of the focus has been on the federal side.
Yeah. And people just don't know how to function at a state level.
Yeah.
They just, for somebody that gives to Planned Parenthood every month, you could say, well, that's helping at a national level. Now, there is no donating to Planned Parenthood for the state of Missouri if you want that money to go to abortion.
Right.
So what you were doing before that made you feel like you were in the fight and you were doing something now makes no difference. And I think that's where people are really fueling some of their anger about this. How that comes out for electoral politics, I'm not 100% sure. But did you see Bill de Blasio dropped out of his
I did see that,
race?
the congressional race, yeah.
Did you think Bill de Blasio had any future
no.
in Democratic politics
Not
at
at
all?
all.
No, not at all. Yeah, collectively, America could just give him the finger once and just say,
I mean,
please,
he's another
please go
example
away.
of a politician with an ego that just seems to be immune
Yeah.
to what popular support is.
Let's
for them.
end on, what's your thoughts about what's happening in the UK and who's going to be the next prime minister there?
Oh, gosh, that's a good question. That seems to be, I mean, completely up in the air right now.
There's like an Indian gentleman and some lady, right?
There is, yeah.
Look at me play it all, identity politics there, but that's how I saw him on Twitter.
There's three candidates. I think those two are considered the most likely to emerge, but there are three that are being bandied about. I think after this next week, there's some jockeying going on. There'd be an idea of who might have greater support. And again, it all comes down to collective vote haggling, among the members of parliament who, essentially decide who that next prime minister will be. So,
do you think the American people would ever accept a system where no UK citizen is going to vote for the next prime minister? Is my understanding.
Right, that's correct. Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Do you
have
think
it
the
so
American
ingrained.
people would ever swallow that? Probably wouldn't.
Probably would, but we've already kind of acclimated to that kind of system. We used to have a lot of split ticket voting between president and a member of Congress. That is much less so now. In fact, that is an extreme minority in terms of how people vote. So we already kind of vote in that frame of mind. Which is how, and as someone who has worked elections in the UK, I remember going door to door, and it would be, vote Conservative Party, vote for your member of Parliament, so-and-so. And the whole idea was people inherently know they're voting for then David Cameron, who was the prime minister, and for complete control of the government to go to that party. So yes, you're voting for the friendly face and the name on the palm card, but you're also voting for complete government control by that party.
Yeah.
And so that's different than our system. But at the same time, we've become so much more polarized that's kind of already happening.
And they've been through one round of this, and they have like two more or something?
Yeah, it's multiple rounds, and basically, so those with less votes drop off and votes get, reallocated. Not unlike I'm blanking on the name of the voting system that has started to be implemented, part of the reform efforts, like in Maine.
The digital system or the graduated scale
yes,
thingy.
The scale,
I can't.
Which
yes.
I'm
why did that
like,
term just completely
just
keep?
You know what I'm talking about? It's left to my mind.
Damn it!
Yeah.
Yes. Keep talking. I'll think of it.
Okay. So not unlike that, right? So you have votes that are reallocated, and so that's why you have the multiple rounds of voting. And so it ensures an outcome where you have someone who has kind of the broad base of support among the most members of the party.
Who would be president right now if the House and Senate voted for the presidency?
Oh.
Good God. That'd be a fight.
Oh, that would be. Yeah.
Wow.
I've always felt we've come close to, having scenarios where the the presidency would be decided in the House, which I'm glad that has never happened. And the way that our Constitution outlines that is that each state, if there was a contested presidential election, would get one vote. And so it would be the majority of from the House of Representatives, congressmen from that state, whoever majority decides out of, the voting members, and one vote goes to that person. But that could get really crazy really quickly.
I don't have any knowledge of this. I'm just kind of making this up. But there's no... So being the president is so much different, it sounds like, than being the prime minister. The president has almost like a direct connection with the American people.
Yeah.
They win that office by forming some type of relationship with directly with the American people.
Because they're the only person that is voted on by the entire country at once. Yeah.
Either you want to go have a beer with the guy or you like some policy, but you've got to feel it personally, I think, to vote for the president.
Right.
And in this system, that seems like that's completely divorced and it's all party.
It's much more detached, yes. And so, and I would say British people, they all have opinions like we do about their prime minister at any given time, but they're a little bit more distant and detached. They're not as strong and emotional because you're right. Those bonds aren't there because you're not voting directly for the name.
So how did Boris Johnson win an election of PMs? Because you could just look at that guy and see this guy's just a pain in the ass wherever he goes.
Yeah.
How did his own people, I guess, who had to know, hey, this guy's got some issues. How did he win election?
I mean, part of it was circumstance because Theresa May, so she was a former PM. Her government fell, vote of no confidence, because she wasn't able to enact Brexit. And it was causing a strain and a lot of dysfunction and chaos, not knowing where the UK was going to be, and the deadline approaching with the EU to decide that. And Boris Johnson had made that his singular issue. He had been out there in support of Brexit going back to when he was mayor of London, back before he was a member of parliament. So he was able to swoop in and said, hey, I've been arguing for this. I have a plan. Follow my plan. We'll get this done.
Gotcha.
It'll be seamless. And so people, who didn't like him or thought he was kind of ridiculous or, kind of erratic, they didn't respect the fact that, this guy's been out front on this since day one. He's been an authority on this, so I may not like his personality.
He turned that election to a single issue that
Brexit,
he was on
that he was the sole person able to execute on Brexit.
It's a good political move.
Which is good. But, again, ironically, he's run into some of the same issues, and so Brexit is still somewhat of a cluster because there was no easy way to implement this anyway. But, that's another story.
As Trump was able to convince America that Americans in trouble and I'm the only one that can save it,
I alone can fix it.
Boris Johnson said, I'm the only one that can get us through Brexit.
Yes.
And that's what he used. And as soon as that didn't go as well and other things happened, they were done with him. Much like Trump.
Scandal in government, COVID, and multiple things, and then he's done,
Brendan, listen, it's a crisp 100 degrees here today. I think this week has been about as hot as it can get, I think. And no, that's not true. It can get hotter, but it's very hot, It's pretty hot here. Nothing like London or France, which I think hit a high of like 106
all-time
this
records
week.
Broken. And you have
and
to...
the record before was 101. That's a pretty big jump.
And these are northern countries that rarely see temperatures like this. Like the average in London this time of year is like upper 70s, lower 80s.
Yeah. So just for some geography, these countries would be located in Canada if they were in North America, like the middle to middle upper part of Canada. So for them to be 106 degrees, that's ridiculous.
You also have wildfires out of control in France and Germany, which is unheard of in those countries. And you have a lot of deaths due to heat exhaustion because you also have to remember that most Europeans don't have air conditioning because they've never needed it. And there's also an aversion to it over there, much more so than here. So.
I just can't see Europe completely retooling their
lifestyles and infrastructure.
Lifestyle.
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen. They're just going to have to deal with it. You do anything fun for the tonight or the summer or anything? We're trying to end on something fun, but I can't.
Oh.
It's been a pretty unfun conversation the whole time for topics.
It has been, yeah. No, I'm trying to stay cool right now, but...
Has your travel schedule died down for the summer?
Died down a little bit. I have to go out to Ohio for some client work in a couple weeks.
What part of it? What city?
Columbus.
Okay, Columbus is pretty cool.
Which I've never been to Columbus. So
that's central Ohio, if I recall correctly.
I've been to Cleveland once, never been to Columbus.
Yeah. Ohio's a pretty cool state. It's huge. And there's like 5 or 6 cities in Ohio that have over 1 million people.
Yeah. So yeah, you have Columbus, Cleveland, Toledo.
Yeah. What's the big
Akron?
one?
Is that another?
Akron's
big one?
another one. There's a ton of people in Ohio. That's why,
Yeah.
again,
Cincinnati. Yeah.
Cincinnati, where Republicans are going to have to take Ohio moving forward if they have any.
That has to be
thing.
locked down.
Yeah.
I'm going to see Imagine Dragons in a couple weeks.
That's pretty good.
So, yeah.
I think we're going to a sporting game tonight. We're not going to stay. The whole
I was going to
time.
say, gosh, that's
we're not staying. The whole
Okay.
time. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I moved my 22-year-old daughter back home with us yesterday.
Oh, okay.
She graduated college. She's got a job.
Yes.
Now she's moved back to KC.
I remember you saying
and
that's awesome. She's all set. Yeah.
Now we got to get that kid out of the house by the end of the year, because once your kids move out, you're done with having kids in your house. You don't want them back. So
Yeah, not long term.
it's like, okay, Kate, let's get on the stick here because we got to go. That's our. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.